This is Moments of Truth, the webcast with and for customer success professionals. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker. Today, I'm joined by Manisha Marberry, Director of Customer Success at Sprinklr, a provider of enterprise software for customer experience management. Manisha, welcome to the program and thanks for making time for me today. Why
Thank
don't you tell our
you so
viewers and listeners more about you and your Sprinklr solution?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm so happy to be here and really appreciate you taking the time to connect with me. So, in the last 20 years, we've created so many new ways of communicating with each other. Social media channels, messaging channels, these are all very new. And what's fascinating is that we are now more connected than ever before. People are spending 2+ hours on their phones or looking at their laptops each day compared to these traditional channels. And what's also interesting is that these channels have also changed how customers and consumers behave. They're now the ones in control. They're now the ones deciding what they want and when they want it. I think I speak for many people out there when I say Amazon Prime is probably one of my best friends right now as we're in quarantine. And so this really puts brands in a position of trying to figure out how to best adapt. How can they harness what people are saying about them? How can they personalize these experiences? And it really brings up a host of other capabilities that are needed to support the modern channel, the modern customer. So, Sprinklr, we provide a unified platform that brings all teams and functions together so that customers can better service their customers across these modern channels. And I've been with the company for 6 years. It's been an incredible journey to see not only how we've grown as a company, but also how we have also grown our software as well. So very excited to share a little bit more about what Sprinklr has been doing, and hopefully some of this information will be helpful to your viewers.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the overview. Yes, Amazon Prime. I see the truck actually right up the street. I think the Amazon Prime comes here so often that we are now giving them Christmas cards.
I love
Both
it.
both my wife and I. Yeah, yeah. So definitely has changed the way we shop. I feel for the better, but I'm not a big fan of malls. Anyway, so last week when we spoke during our prep call, we got on this topic of value realization. And that's a pretty critical role of the customer success manager. You could have a great handoff from sales, an amazing onboarding experience, amazing adoption metrics, and incredible response times to customer inquiries. But if you're not helping the customer realize value and ensuring that key stakeholders recognize that value that you're providing, you're at a pretty significant disadvantage. So what I thought we could do today was talk more about value realization and how you and your team approach it.
Yeah, so in the world of Sprinklr, as a unified front office platform, enabling organizations to make their customers happier, it's really important for us to understand what are the challenges that these brands are looking to solve for. And for every customer that we work with, and for every brand out there, challenges are going to be different. And not only are they going to be different coming out of that onboarding phase, but it's going to continue to evolve and change as they continue to evolve as an organization. I think right now is a great example of this for many brands out there. I don't think a lot of brands were prepared for a global pandemic and how this may impact their supply chains or their customer service or their ability to connect with customers, because there's so much buzz around what's going on in the world. And so this is something that at Sprinklr, we don't just look at value realization as something that is done at the beginning of the partnership. There's so much importance in making sure that that is a reoccurring conversation that's happening throughout the partnership. So with that said, the first thing that we do when we're working with customers is we want to identify, what does a positive business outcome look like to them? Every business is ultimately focused on three outcomes, namely driving revenue, reducing costs, and mitigating risk. And so what we've done at Sprinklr is we've identified how these positive business outcomes can be applied to our software. And so coming out of the onboarding process, what we're doing is identifying, coming out of that experience, what are the top PBOs that we're looking to accomplish at that time. And once we have that, we're able to tie it back to what we call positive business use cases. So at Sprinklr, we have positive business use cases that span across all of our solutions. And by definition for us, a use case is a way that we define a business requirement. It's framed as an action performed by a role or by a Sprinklr user to achieve a goal. And so for us, what we're doing is really mapping every piece of Sprinklr functionality back to these use cases, which then map back to the positive business outcomes.
So it's like a set of generic jobs to be done that Sprinkler helps you achieve.
Essentially, yeah. And with every customer that we have, of course, we're able to deep dive into those positive business use cases. But we do have, a framework of how we want to approach. So one of the examples that I love to give is around crisis management. I think it's so relevant now more than ever.
Yeah.
And a crisis is going to look different across organizations. For some organizations, it's about an adverse effect to something. For some organizations, it may be a recall. And so with that said, the use case may be the ability to manage a crisis, but what that looks like per organization is going to vary.
Never fail to capitalize on a crisis, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you have this library of use cases, and then based off of who your customer is and what makes them special, because every customer individually is special, of course, you personalize that, you customize that for their particular need.
Absolutely. So an example I will give around use cases, I have a financial services customer who one of their use cases is all around being able to provide their leadership team with comprehensive reporting across all of their modern channels for paid, owned, and earned. And so for them within the Sprinklr platform, knowing that this is an area of importance, we're able to look at features and functionality specific to the reporting area of Sprinklr. And as new functionality is released, we can see which pieces of functionality map back to that particular area of paid, owned, and earned reporting. And throughout our value realization check-ins with the customer, we can make sure that we are surfacing these new ideas, as we go throughout the partnership, so that they're constantly optimizing their use of Sprinklr.
Now, when you go into this process, do you get specific with here's the success criteria, and here's that quantification of the success criteria? I mean, people talk about value realization all the time, and they say, "Oh, well, see, we're doing what we said we would do." But I mean, how do you quantify that? How do you say, "Hey, we by using this aspect of our platform, by using this functionality, it resulted in X for you"?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful and such an important question, Andrew. While I think we all want to enter a partnership hoping that our customers have it all figured out, sometimes they don't. So that's the importance of being able to have these types of conversations on a regular cadence, because it allows us not only to identify what value realization means from a standpoint of PBOs and positive business use cases, but it also helps us do some discovery for those customers that maybe need a little bit more help. So anytime that we are starting off with a customer, we've gone through that onboarding process, we'll work with them to identify what success looks like to them. And it really comes down to where they are at in their growth as an organization. For some customers, it may be very much focused on follower acquisition, whereas for others, it may be more on loyalty and retention of their fans and followers, and what more can they be doing there. And so that's a really important part of the value realization process, is working with the customer to understand where they're at and where they need help. At Sprinklr, we think of customer success as your strategic advisors. We're there to work with you and help dig a little bit deeper and ask those right questions to get you to that place. And so to answer your question, when it comes to identifying those success metrics or KPIs, sometimes customers know, sometimes they don't, but that's what we're here for, is to help make sure that we're guiding them in that process.
So when you face those customers that don't know, they can't articulate, when you ask them what is your success criteria, and they have no idea how to verbalize that. What do you do?
So what I personally do, and I can't speak for everybody at Sprinklr, but what I like to do is share some examples of similar customers or similar sized organizations to just get some wheels turning a little bit. So I have a deck that I put together years ago that highlights a number of business objectives, highlights a number of business strategies, highlights a number of targeted initiatives, and we'll look at it together and identify which ones out of these apply to your business. And from there, we're able to at least get the wheels turning a little bit.
Right.
We'll also do some digging into annual reports. We'll do some digging into internal documentation and work together to identify what is that next step. And so where I prefer to start is, let's try to identify three success metrics that are maybe coming down from your leadership, or maybe they're coming from an annual report, or maybe as somebody that's new in the role, maybe social is a new function. Let's identify what we think is really going to hit home and resonate with your leadership team. And then from there, we'll tie in those PBUCs, or those positive business use cases that I mentioned.
Right. So you start with here's some examples. What resonates with you? Okay, let's talk through those. Let's ideate, and let's figure out something that makes sense. I think you raise, though, and what I think is a really important strategy. You kind of passed by it, but I want to point that out in particular. Is what are the objectives from what are the corporate objectives, and how can we have, how can we establish success metrics, and how can we establish quantifiable success metrics that feed into those corporate objectives? Right. Value realization is all fine and dandy, but when you can tie them into specific corporate goals, that makes them incredibly powerful. Right. And what that also does is it helps you get the right stakeholders to take notice of that value that you're delivering.
Absolutely. And everything, as we say, everything comes back to the why. Why are we doing this? What purpose is it serving the organization? What value is it bringing? And so by working with our customers and putting that together, we can ensure that everything we do when it comes to those positive business outcomes, those positive business use cases, we're keeping that as our North Star, if you will. And as an organization that is constantly putting out new releases, it's important that with those new releases, we are very focused with which ones apply to each customer. So for example, if I know that one of my customers is really interested in positive business use case 1, 3, and 5, when new functionality is released and I can see which areas go with 1, 3, and 5, I can make sure that that's where my attention is going. And I can surface up that functionality of, hey, look, we just had a new release. We have several areas that map back to 1, 3, and 5. Let's use this time to go through those new features and functionality and see what resonates and works for you. Or let's test something out and see. Maybe it won't work, but it's worth giving it a try, knowing what their success metrics are.
How do you make sure that the right key stakeholders are hearing about the value that's being realized? I mean, it's one thing to create value, but it's a different story when you've got to make sure that that value that you've been realized is that information's been disseminated to the right people.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Again, Andrew, you're on a roll today. As always, I've listened to many of your other podcasts and you always come up with the best questions.
Thank you.
So what I would say for that is during the day-to-day, our day-to-day contacts, that's who we're having these more technical, tactical conversations with in terms of the exact functionality and the exact positive business use cases. But the purpose in doing this is so that when we do get to a time where we are having an executive business review, the executive business review is not just about adoption and consumption, but really about those value realization drivers. And that is how we approach executive business reviews at Sprinklr. Is it's all about driving value and showcasing value. And they really do go hand in hand, adoption and consumption with value realization, because through those meetings that we're having, those value realization check-ins, we're able to see, well, where are there gaps? Where are there areas where we could be increasing training or doing more to make sure that people are aware of the functionality, so that by the time we do get to an executive business review, our adoption and consumption numbers are where we want them to be. But it's also, like I said, a great opportunity to identify gaps and what are the next steps. There are many customers that I work with who, while they are excited about Sprinklr's artificial intelligence offerings, it can be a little bit scary. It is very new. And so for some of my customers, we're going to see that they're utilizing a variety of our AI tools, where I have some customers that are maybe using one or two, but the next step is to, add 3 and 4, between now and the next executive business review.
Any tips, best practices, suggestions that you have for people out there as they either approach value realization, they start taking, they've been successful despite themselves, they haven't focused on value realization, or they want to do a kind of a internal check on, are we doing the most that we can from a value realization perspective, making sure that we're not only delivering the value, but also amplifying that the value has been realized?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the first step is really identifying the value that your software brings. What are the challenges that you are looking to solve for? And from there, taking a step back to see how you can insert this within your regular check-ins with your customers. And Andrew, I know we talked about this a bit during our prep call, but at Sprinklr, we don't call them bi-weekly check-ins or weekly check-ins. We call them value realization check-ins or value realization calls, because we want it to be looked at as a strategic opportunity to come together and align on business goals, objectives, and how we're going to reach those success metrics. And I think that's so key. I think we've all been in situations with customers where it feels like we're jumping on a call, we're checking in, we're maybe doing a little bit of troubleshooting, but we're not really adding the value that's needed to impact those corporate objectives that we talked about earlier. So I think that that's absolutely key, is making sure that you are aware of the different areas of value that your organization or your software can bring. And from there, thinking about how you want to structure those check-ins that you're having. For Sprinklr, what we like to do is spend our time talking through a pretty structured agenda. With every value realization check-in we have, we're looking at those positive business outcomes, positive business use cases, success criteria, KPIs. We're talking about not only new features and functionality, but what is some existing features and functionality that maybe we haven't yet been able to take advantage of. We're also looking at adoption and consumption and how that plays a role in these features and functionality. With Sprinklr being such a large tool, there are going to be some people that only use certain areas of the platform. For example, we may have an analyst who specializes in reporting in the social listening area of Sprinklr. And in that case, there may be a different approach we need to take when it comes to making sure that they're fully clear on how to work the new feature and functionality that we're going over. And so that's where adoption and consumption can come in. So to summarize the answer to your question, I think the first step is really understanding the value that your organization can bring. And then the second piece would be to come up with a structured agenda of items that you make sure that you are checking off the list each time, because I can promise you over time, those items are going to change for your customers, whether it be a global pandemic, whether it be a crisis on their end, whether it is a new celebrity spokesperson that's bringing in a lot of buzz. There's a number of different things that could impact an organization's overall strategy.
For sure. And the key is, and you said a couple times, make sure we're delivering value. Right? We
Mhm.
always want to make sure we're delivering value with every single interaction,
Mhm.
just like the value you have delivered today with me.
Thank you.
And the time that you spent, I very much appreciate. I value the time that you have spent with us today, and your perspective and your best practices on value realization. Manisha, thank you. Thanks for the time, and stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll be able to talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Andrew.